Flashpoint, Tel Aviv, November 2nd, 2025. The city, usually alive with energy and light, now sits on the precipice of something unprecedented. As dusk falls, a sense of unease settles over the streets, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Suddenly, air raid sirens scream across the city, their piercing wail echoing off glass towers and ancient stone alike. The familiar sound, once a warning of routine threats, now signals something far more ominous. But this time, something is different. The fear in people's eyes is sharper, the confusion deeper. Residents scramble for shelter, clutching loved ones, scanning the sky for answers. Israeli air defense systems, renowned as some of the world's most advanced, spring into action. Iron Dome and David's Sling light up the night, launching interceptors in a desperate attempt to shield the city. Yet for the first time in years, these defenses are struggling, overwhelmed by a new wave of sophisticated missiles raining down from Iran. These aren't the drones and rockets of past conflicts. They're faster, more precise, and engineered to evade detection. Radar screens flicker with blurs of incoming threats, each one a potential catastrophe. Intelligence teams work through the night, piecing together fragments of missile debris. The evidence is chilling. Chinese markings, advanced circuitry, and unmistakable signs of foreign technology. The unthinkable is confirmed. The technology fueling this assault bears the fingerprints of Beijing. The world holds its breath. In capitals from Washington to Moscow, leaders watch the crisis unfold in real time, their faces etched with concern. Crowds gather around screens, anxiously awaiting updates as the sense of global peril grows. What began as a regional rivalry has just gone global. The conflict's shockwaves ripple outward, igniting fears of a much larger confrontation. China, long seen as a neutral economic player in the Middle East, has now openly backed Iran. This bold move shatters its carefully cultivated image as a peaceful power, revealing a new willingness to assert itself on the world stage. The shock isn't just military. Diplomatic and economic earthquakes follow in quick succession. Stock markets plummet, world leaders scramble to respond, and emergency meetings are called in every major capital. Oil prices rocket upwards, threatening to plunge the global economy into recession. Gas stations overflow with anxious drivers, while energy markets spiral into chaos. The web of international relations begins to tear apart. Alliances fracture, old rivalries resurface, and the world order that has held for decades starts to unravel. China's era of quiet neutrality is over. In its place stands a nation unafraid to flex its superpower muscles, making a bold declaration of ambition that reverberates across continents. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, now faces a profound crisis. Should it intervene and risk a catastrophic war with China, or show restraint and risk ceding global leadership? The stakes have never been higher. The shockwaves from China's support for Iran are only just beginning. The world stands at the threshold of a new era, one that promises to reshape the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. The world has entered a new, dangerous era. The rules have changed, and the future is more uncertain than ever before. For decades, China's approach to the Middle East was defined by strategic ambiguity and economic pragmatism. Beijing maintained friendly relations with rivals, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, focusing on energy security and trade. China avoided military alliance, presenting itself as a neutral, business-first partner. This balancing act allowed China to broker deals and even mediate between Saudi Arabia and Iran in 2023. But beneath the surface, contradictions grew. As China's interests expanded, so did its vulnerabilities. The simmering Iran-Israel conflict always threatened to force China off the sidelines. A major escalation would demand a choice: protect one set of interests at the expense of another. The era of cautious neutrality could not last forever. To truly grasp the depth of China's strategy in the Middle East, you need to follow the oil, because oil is not just a commodity here, it's the very lifeblood of international power and influence. Every barrel that moves from the Persian Gulf to the ports of China tells a story of shifting alliances, economic necessity, and geopolitical ambition. China, now the world's largest oil importer, is deeply dependent on foreign energy to fuel its massive industrial engine and growing cities. Iranian crude, often sold at a significant discount due to harsh international sanctions, has become a crucial part of this equation. For Beijing, these discounted barrels are more than just a bargain. They're a strategic advantage, helping China keep its energy costs low and its economy competitive. This relationship is nothing short of a lifeline for Tehran, whose economy has been battered by years of sanctions and isolation. For Beijing, it's a strategic asset, giving China leverage in a region dominated by Western interests. The 25-year partnership agreement signed in 2021 formalized this bond, promising billions in Chinese investment in exchange for a steady flow of oil. China's investments in Iranian infrastructure, ranging from oil fields to pipelines and refineries, are designed to create a self-sustaining loop. In return for building up Iran's energy sector, China secures a reliable, discounted oil supply, largely shielded from the reach of US sanctions. This closed circuit of energy and investment is a bold attempt to insulate both nations from Western pressure. However, this deepening alliance with Iran comes at a cost. It puts China in a precarious position with other major oil suppliers in the region, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE, nations that are not only energy giants but also key players in global finance and politics. Beijing has worked tirelessly to reassure Gulf states that its ties with Iran won't undermine their own partnerships. Chinese diplomats regularly host Gulf leaders, emphasizing economic cooperation and mutual respect. Yet, the reality is that every step closer to Tehran risks alienating Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, making China's balancing act ever more delicate. The calculation is razor-sharp. Iranian oil is cheap and plentiful, but over-reliance could jeopardize China's access to the broader Gulf market. If the Gulf monarchies feel threatened or sidelined, they could retaliate by tightening oil supplies or shifting alliances, putting China's energy security at risk. And, if conflict erupts, whether from regional rivalries, US intervention, or a sudden crisis, China's deep economic bond with Iran could pull it into the heart of a Middle Eastern firestorm. The stakes are enormous, with the potential to disrupt global oil flows and trigger economic shockwaves far beyond the region. In this high-stakes game, oil is far more than just energy. It's a strategic tether, binding China's fate to the volatile politics of the Middle East and shaping the future of global power. The black gold that fuels China's rise could just as easily ignite a global crisis, reminding us that in the world of energy, every advantage comes with a risk. Despite its economic might, China's military presence in the Middle East is minimal. Its only official base is a small naval outpost in Djibouti, far from the region's main flashpoints. China prefers economic influence over military entanglement, learning from America's costly wars. But as Chinese investments and citizens in the region grow, so does the pressure to protect them. The gap between China's interests and its ability to defend them is widening. A conflict involving Iran could force China to cross a line it has long avoided. Open military support for Iran would mark a seismic shift in Chinese foreign policy. Initially covert, this support could quickly become overt in a crisis. China might supply advanced anti-ship and surface-to-air missiles, transforming Iran's military capabilities. Real-time intelligence from Chinese satellites could give Iran a decisive edge. Logistical and financial support would sustain Iran's war effort, while Chinese advisors might appear on the ground. Each step would escalate China's involvement, moving it from passive partner to active co-belligerent. The risks: global condemnation, economic fallout, and direct confrontation with the US. China's choice would tie its fate to the outcome of a Middle Eastern war. The Rubicon would be crossed. Israel would respond to a Chinese-backed Iran with overwhelming force. Strikes would target Iranian facilities, especially those linked to Chinese technology, the risk hitting sites with Chinese advisors, potentially triggering direct Chinese retaliation. The conflict would escalate rapidly, drawing in the United States. US forces would move to support Israel, bringing American and Chinese militaries into dangerous proximity. The risk of miscalculation, an accidental clash between superpowers, would skyrocket. America would face an impossible choice: defend Israel and risk war with China, or hold back and risk losing global credibility. Every option carries catastrophic risk. If China were to openly support Iran, it would send shockwaves through the world's diplomatic landscape, fundamentally altering the balance of power. This move would not just be a simple alliance. It would represent a direct challenge to the existing global order, signaling that China is willing to confront the West and its allies head-on. In response, Gulf Arab states, long balancing their relationships between East and West, would likely sever diplomatic and economic ties with Beijing. They would throw their full support behind the United States and Israel, forming a united front to counter China's influence in the region. The United Nations Security Council, already plagued by divisions, would become completely paralyzed. Vetoes from major powers would block any meaningful action, leaving the world's most important forum for conflict resolution unable to mediate or de-escalate rising tensions. China's global image would suffer an unprecedented collapse. Once seen as a rising economic powerhouse, it would now be viewed as an aggressive disruptor, facing widespread condemnation and protests across Western nations and beyond. Europe, caught between economic interests and security concerns, would ultimately side with the US. Major infrastructure projects like the Belt and Road Initiative would be abandoned or left incomplete, as trust in China evaporates and investment dries up. Developing nations, many of which have tried to remain neutral, would be forced to pick sides in this new global divide. The era of non-alignment would come to an abrupt end, as countries are pressured to declare their loyalties. The world would fracture into hostile camps, reminiscent of the Cold War. But this time, the stakes would be even higher, with deeper economic interdependence and more complex global supply chains making the risks of conflict and disruption far greater. The global order, painstakingly built over decades, would be shattered. International cooperation would give way to confrontation and division as trust between nations collapses and old alliances are tested. The consequences would be swift and severe. Financial markets would plunge into chaos, global institutions would scramble to respond, and the world would enter a period of profound uncertainty and instability. The economic fallout would be immediate and catastrophic. The Strait of Hormuz would close, sending oil prices skyrocketing and triggering a global recession. Energy importing nations would face inflation, rationing, and economic paralysis. Global trade routes through the Suez Canal and Red Sea would be disrupted, causing massive delays and shortages. The just-in-time supply chain would collapse, leading to widespread unemployment and social unrest. Financial markets would panic, and a global credit crunch would follow. China, hit by sanctions and trade disruption, would face internal instability. The dream of globalization would end, replaced by economic warfare and fragmentation. The world economy would be thrown into chaos. The ripple effects would touch every corner of the globe. China's support for Iran would end the old world order and birth a dangerously unstable new one. The world would split into two rigid blocks, a US-led alliance and a China-led axis. Saudi Arabia and the UAE would return to the American security umbrella, while NATO would find renewed purpose. Nations in the global south would be forced to pick sides, ending non-alignment. The risk of wider war would become a permanent feature of international life. Advanced weaponry would proliferate, and flashpoints like Taiwan could ignite. The future would be defined by confrontation, fragmentation, and uncertainty. Beijing's decision would not just start a regional war, it would usher in a new, dangerous age for humanity.